Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
Let's get going here at 7:37. It's Valentine's Day. It's Friday. It's unbelievably romantic in this town right now. I don't know if you...
Yeah,
are you feeling the vibe, Patrice Onwuka?
Yes, I know. Even at the Onwuka household, I have on good authority that the boys are bringing love to their classrooms today and to their teachers.
Oh, wait, well, hold on. They should be careful of that. There are rules now in certain school systems. All right,
not
good.
That kind. The platonic kind.
Wait, if I could revisit my 80s. Coming up at 8:35, I mean the 1980s, not being in my 80s. At 8:35, Chloe Cole, she's a sweetheart, and she wants to protect children from the mutilation that she had to suffer under the guise of gender transition. She's going to talk about this judge now trying to block Trump's executive order on that. But joining us right now is EJ Antoni. I kind of have a man crush on EJ. He's a very well-dressed man.
He is.
I love his
and very smart,
splendor. Too. He's that as well. Well, of course he is. He's at Heritage Foundation. They're full of smarties. EJ, happy Valentine's Day to you, my friend. That made it awkward. I'm sorry. Good to talk with you.
Larry, my pleasure. Let me just say, you're the only one I'd ever want to spend my Valentine's Day with on the radio, okay? Let me just say that. Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the on-the-radio qualifier there. Thank you. All right. Yesterday, President Trump made an announcement. We were told that this is it. Trump is going to do what he's calling reciprocal tariffs, right? And this is going to blow up our economy. Well, let's listen to a little bit of what he said, and then we'll break it down. Go ahead.
And on trade, I have decided for purposes of fairness that I will charge a reciprocal tariff, meaning whatever countries charge the United States of America, we will charge them. No more, no less. In other words, they charge us a tax or tariff, and we charge them the exact same tax or tariff. Very simple.
It is simple, and it sounds very, very common sense. Now, I saw a lot of free traders yesterday screaming about this, saying, this isn't free trade, this isn't free trade, this is bad. But if other countries, EJ, are charging us right now, by definition, we don't have free trade, right? Or where am I wrong?
No, Larry, that's exactly right. You're spot on here. These people will shout from the rooftops about how they want free trade. I mean, it's like going to a football game, and can you imagine if the one team was constantly getting penalized because they weren't playing by the rules, except when the other team violated those rules, nothing happened to them. So the refs keep throwing flags for defensive pass interference on one team, but will never do it on the other. That's kind of what
are you holding a grudge against the Kansas City Chiefs here, EJ? I think there's some hostile subtext in there.
Hey, all I can say is that my Eagles won. All right, that's all I know.
All right.
Beyond that, I'm just a simple economist, Larry. But look,
the
other thing that's important to remember here is the fact that if we want to be for free trade, then we need to be for all free trade, not just free international trade. Why is it these folks only say that we want free international trade? If you want no taxes on trade, then you should want no taxes on domestic trade either. You should be fighting against the income tax. You should be fighting to get rid of sales taxes. I would much rather get rid of those things first and worry about tariffs, worry about international trade later.
You know, EJ, it's also interesting when we looked at the first Trump administration, the tariffs that were implemented at that point really didn't deliver the kind of price increases that we saw, obviously, over the past 4 years of the Biden administration, when prices are up over 20%, going on 23% overall, and significantly in individual categories. So, I mean, I agree with you. I think that I do think that there's a lot of hemming and hawing, free trade, but there may be a good case to be made that maybe the massive price increases that the left are hoping for may not materialize even with this round of tariffs. Do you agree with that?
Well, if we just look at what we saw during the first Trump administration, those fears never actually materialized. In fact, if we look at the price index for imports as published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that price index actually fell after Trump implemented those tariffs, especially the ones on China. And if we really dig into the Chinese tariffs during the first Trump admin, what we find is that about 80 cents on the dollar was simply eaten by the Chinese manufacturers. Only 20% was passed on to the U.S. There's a lot of reasons for that. You have different elasticities to worry about where consumers have alternatives. They could buy steel from the U.S., for example. They could buy steel made in Sweden. That was another big source. You also have changes in exchange rates. There are a whole host of different reasons why these costs are not all passed on to American consumers.
So, EJ, what do you expect to happen here? And how do you respond to people who say, inherently speaking, if in fact these tariffs get employed? Well, let's get to that in a minute. Do you expect these other countries now to take this threat seriously, like France, for instance, and say, okay, fine. We'll stop charging you to import goods into France, and you leave us alone if we want to export goods to America. Do you think that's the end game for the most part?
I think so. Now, it's not going to happen entirely, and I think the president knows that. Which is why he is perfectly okay with, again, starting this shift away from domestic taxation, things like the income tax, and towards tariffs. And there's a couple of different reasons for that, not the least of which is we want to start shifting some of our tax burden overseas. You know, the American government, especially the American military, provides a lot of benefits for the rest of the world, benefits for which they are not paying. I think it's very good that foreigners should help pay for our Navy, for example, which patrols everyone's sea lanes and keeps international trade going. That's a good thing in my mind.
Really quickly, I noticed that you put out this morning, I just retweeted it on your X handle, Real EJ Antoni. You talked about household debt crossing $18 trillion for the first time. President Trump has called on Jerome Powell, the head of the Fed, to cut interest rates. And I mean, that directly impacts consumer debt, like your credit cards, your auto loans. Do you think that it is time for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates again, or do you think they need to keep interest rates where they are to try to tame inflation, which is rising again?
Well, what the Fed should really be doing here is following the market, not trying to lead it around by the nose. You know, the Fed artificially put interest rates way too low, and that caused 40-year high inflation. It did that to try to finance all of the runaway spending under the Biden admin. They were way late to the game in terms of raising rates, which meant they had to do it hard and fast. And then they made this absolutely asinine decision right before the election to cut interest rates, in my opinion, to try to get their preferred candidate across the finish line. That was election interference. And every month since they did that, the annual inflation rate has been rising. So they have set off yet another round of inflation for Trump to deal with. I mean, frankly, I think this entire board of governors needs to go, and we need to get new people in there who will work hand in glove with the Treasury in order to get interest rates down for the American people.
E.J. Antoni from Heritage Foundation, happy Valentine's Day, and thanks for shedding a little bit of fact on the tariff conversation. You're not getting a lot of the reasoned conversation about it on other outlets, so we appreciate you bringing it here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me, Larry.